Across America and around the world, you're listening once again to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Before we get into tonight's program, ladies and gentlemen, which, by the way, is going to be one of the most important that we've ever done, and make sure that you have pad, a paper, and pen or pencil by your side all through tonight's episode of the Hour of the Time, and, of course, the later time slot will be continuing. Now, I advise you, if you cannot tape both programs or listen to both programs, that you send and purchase both of the tapes for tonight's The Hour of the Time. If you're not a CADGI member, tapes are $8 per episode. If you are a CADGI member, of course, you know that they are $6. These prices are post-paid, ladies and gentlemen. You do not have to add anything for postage or handling. Send your money to William Cooper, Post Office Box 1420, Sholo, spelled S-H-O-W-L-O-W, Arizona, 85901. That's P.O. Box 1420, Sholo, Arizona, 85901. Now, I've been trying to warn patriots in the United States of America about a Trojan horse for a long, long time. And I have reaped quite a bit of unjust criticism and have been personally attacked for trying to keep you all from falling into the trap. I'm going to read you one more expose of a man who goes by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Bo Gritz. We call him Bobo Grits here because he is absolutely insane if he thinks that he's going to continue to fool patriots in this country. So for that, he's a Bobo. And I tell you right now that when all of the patriots finally realize who this man really is, they're going to have his butt for breakfast. And we call that grits where I come from. Headline from the Associated Press: Bo Gritz starts supremacist site activist claim. Portland, Oregon. Former presidential candidate James Bo Gritz is establishing a center for white supremacists in central Idaho, a human rights group said Friday. Gritz and some ultra-conservative Christian leaders have purchased about 280 acres of land near Kamaya, Idaho, according to a report issued by the Coalition for Human Dignity. The land is held in trust by the Oregon-based Almost Heaven Properties and the Western Development Trust, headed by Jack McLam, a former Phoenix police officer and associate of Gritz. Well, folks, if you are an identity Christian, I have nothing against that, for I know that you believe in the separation of races. You don't believe in race wars or hurting other people. And I believe in the freedom to choose where you live and who you associate with. I have no complaint with you. However, those who believe that they are a master race, who would kill anyone who doesn't look like them, talk like them, or believe like them, I have a great bone to pick. And I'm telling you right now that James Bo Gritz is out there to find out which of you are going to oppose the New World Order by force of arms, and you'll find yourself taken out of action before you ever have a chance. So you better listen to me, and I hope that you get your head on straight, because there is no master race. Never has been, and never will be. Freedom means freedom for all peoples, of all colors, of all religious persuasions. Anyone who puts limits on freedom are not for freedom. They are, in fact, elitists, no better than those who are trying to enslave us now. Don't get trapped in that, folks. Don't get trapped in it. You haven't got enough people in this whole world to defeat everybody who doesn't look like you or sound like you or worship at the same altar that you do. And if you try to pick that kind of fight, the world will have no other course, than to do to you what you plan to do to them. And I would advise you to think very seriously about that. Don't go away, folks. We're going to teach you how to win the coming battle, or at least be as effective as you possibly can with what you have available to you at this time. And remember, as time goes by, availability of our resources will shrink. Ladies and gentlemen, I have sitting with me a man named John. Of course, this is not his real name, and you will not be privy to his real name or location or anything else, who has built what I believe to be the very best weapon that has been built in my lifetime, or that I have ever seen or known about, that can be effective at extremely long distances and still be very accurate. Now, you're not going to be able to build what he has built, but you can build something that is very, very close to it, and with absolute perfect conditions. And remember, I'm talking about perfect conditions, and if you load your ammunition properly and you're using the proper grain bullet, and you've done the modifications that you're going to learn about tonight, which are all perfectly legal and lawful, you may be able to reach out to 1,400 yards. Remember, all modern armies that operate in the world today that would even have any kind of a chance of occupying our country and oppressing our people cannot fight effectively beyond 200 yards. That's a fact. It's in their training manuals. It is proven every day as they fight all over the world. So, John, I'd like you to give some of your background and just establish your credibility for talking about this particular subject. And then let's talk about what made you decide to build a weapon with this kind of capability.
Okay, Bill, I've had a total of probably we're approaching 25 years currently in the arms trade, small arms trade in one form or another. Shot competitively over that period of time, extensively in all phases, using all conventional small arms available. And I've been involved solid in the last 13 to 14 years in the area of R&D, or research and development, test and evaluation, as well as weapons design and execution, meaning limited production, limited fabrication. By limited, I mean on a custom ordered basis.
In other words, these are the weapons that you don't find in the catalog from a major manufacturer. These are things that are designed, researched, and developed to go beyond usually the capabilities of weapons that have been designed and manufactured on a production line basis.
That's essentially correct, Bill, or maybe more specifically to fill a gap that you would find in the typical catalog, shooter's Bible or wholesale catalog that you might have access to. But yeah, essentially, that's a good description of my area, as it has been solid, or what I've been devoted to for the last 13, 14-year period. Now, the competitive shooting throughout the last quarter century has exposed me to, time and again, to typical small arms ballistics limitations. It has exposed me to many other people's ideas, designs, efforts that either fell short or in some cases might happen to have excelled in the design purpose for which the weapon I happened to be using at the time was designed. That carries us right on into the mid-'80s, during which period I had occasion to design and develop what you'd have to call light, man-deployable, that is man-portable, long-range, I don't know if in order to be politically correct, we want to call it sniper rifle, or let's just call it long-range elk rifle.
That's fine. Although we don't have a reputation for being politically correct on the hour of the time.
I understood that, so I knew what I was getting into. At any rate, during that time period, if all the gun enthusiasts out there will think back to their typical guns and ammo magazine and NRA's Rifleman and whatnot, you were exposed in print and various articles to efforts on the part of, in some cases, larger manufacturers that became engaged in the endeavor of building a conventional actioned rifle or design around an old favorite. I can't really call it small arms cartridge per se. It's almost it almost borders militarily on artillery round, but at any rate, specifically the M2 machine gun round, or in other words, the BMG caliber 50 Browning machine gun round. Seems like there was a fad underway from say 84 to about 87 to achieve a mile plus, that is 1 mile. Mile is 1,760 yards. Rifle, utilizing the venerable ballistics of the caliber 50 BMG round to reach that and beyond with some precision. Now, important thing to remember here is that the Earth's elements bear on ranges so terrifically at anything beyond 500 yards, which, bear in mind, is still in excess of 1/4 mile, and is a substantial range. The elements, wind, atmospheric conditions, humidity, temperature, all of those things come to bear greatly on a small arms projectile that is being asked to follow a given path with some predictability and some precision, to the extent that I don't think we've ever actually entered a science in that direction. What we've done is we've endeavored to provide the highest in precision for a launching pad for an intermediate-sized small arms round that will give an individual a hit probability, I think, is the best term that could be used to describe what it is you're trying to do out there beyond 500 yards or 1/4 mile. Provide the most precise launching pad for that round. And then, of course, try to achieve the greatest in consistency, what is known as ballistics coefficient with regard to projectiles that are being intended for use beyond those ranges. And the rest of it is more or less kind of all up to Mother Nature, to be honest with you. If you've done your job right, if you've trained properly on the range, and that is to say just real basic match type shooter technique. Got your breathing down, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Your pulse rate right, and your timing just right, and tried to gear all the mechanical variables in the direction of accuracy out there at 1,000 yards or beyond. Then, who knows? Everything might fall into place. And we've had days where those things do fall into place. But what I'm getting at is the project all began with the 375 improved Magnum, which, by the way, is the designation for a round. Wildcat is a term often used to describe a round such as this one that simply is not available in its current form off the shelf.
The truth is, you can't buy it commercially anywhere.
That's correct. What a Wildcat actually is very simply a casing, small arms ammunition casing, that was formed in one way or another, using one means or another, out of what is known as a parent cartridge. In this case, the 375 improved mag Wildcat is fire formed, is the actual means to describe the metamorphosis through which that casing is put from deriving its current form from its parent, which was specifically the 375 Holland and Holland Magnum.
So now, when you say fire formed, for our listeners out there who may not understand some of what we're talking about, you're talking about taking a regular 375 H&H Magnum chambered rifle, and that is drilled out or machined to the new specifications that you wish the shell to conform to. And then a regular 375 H&H Magnum shell is put into that chamber and fired, and the expansion of the gases in firing that round actually pushes the shell out to conform to the new shape of the chamber, and now you have an empty shell that can be reloaded to the improved specifications.
Well, now see there, Bill, pardon me, with absolutely no small arms manufacturer background, barrel making capability at all, we've brought you around to the level of understanding of a master gunsmith. That's exactly correct.
Well, I have good teachers.
No, that is exactly, precisely correct. It couldn't have been put, I don't think, worded in a more understandable way, you know, to the general public. That's exactly what occurs. Now, this is to be, and I don't mean to sidetrack very far on this, but this is to be differentiated from other means of wildcatting forming. Other means very often will involve a set of dies. To those of you in the listening audience that happen to be hand loaders, you would be familiar with die sets, presses, and the other implements of the typical reloading bench. Die sets that will range from a minimum of 4 dies in a set, clear up to 6, and in some cases 7, what they call case-forming dies, which will put that extruded piece of brass through all sorts of various contortions, finally arriving at a brand new shape, configuration, and dimension. In this particular case, I would have to call, and by the way, that's the reason that this particular Wildcat was selected for this particular project, was that a high degree of practicality and availability as well as universality was being sought in this project. In other words, part of the design characteristic of this rifle was to be an achievement in availability of common components, beginning with the 375 Holland and Holland Magnum. The H&H 375 Magnum entered this country from Britain originally as a sporting round, began its career through importation back in 1921, and has achieved a tremendous amount of popularity, particularly, let's say, from Minnesota north, all through Canada and on up into Alaska, as a big large game round, meaning, you know, moose, brown bear, grizzly bear, etc.
Has this round been used in big game hunting in Africa before it was curtailed or stopped or whatever has happened over there?
It has. Its application in Africa has it's been considered commonly an intermediate game-sized round on the continent, clear on up into some of the heaviest game, white rhino and elephant and etc. However, it's considered generally somewhat light on the heaviest of African game. Now, we could again sideline, and I won't do it now. I'm going to draw the line here because in the interest of time, we've got an awful lot of ground to cover here this evening. But I might mention that in my studied opinion on that subject, and that is the application of the Holland and Holland 375 round on some of the world's largest game, it's actually superior to the substantially larger bore diameter rounds from, say, 416 on up to 460. some of your half-inch diameter calibers out there. It is that simply because the 375 possesses some of the highest degree penetration characteristics of any round out there. At higher velocities and a slightly smaller, what you call cross-sectional density, its capability to penetrate extremely heavy tissued game and bone structures and attack vitals in very primitive nervous systems is almost second to none. But that's largely been overlooked in the favor of the 40 caliber class, as we call it on the continent. Now, getting back to the 375 selection of this project, as I mentioned, historically, the round found its way into use in the United States in the early 1920s, has achieved a high degree of popularity throughout the contiguous 48 as well as Alaska specifically. So therefore, you really don't have to drive very far or let your fingers do the walking through the phone book very far to find some retailer out there that will have a stack of 4 or 5 boxes in inventory of 375 H&H ammunition, from which, you see, the Wildcat round is derived, or fireformed. So that'll give you a little bit of background as to the reason. Now, beyond that, major considerations in the selection of the round as it pertains to caliber, is the commonly used term to describe the diameter of the projectile, is the fact that 375, that is 0.375 or 375 thousandths in machine shop terminology or measurement, relates to a selection of bullets that is more or less the point of no return as you move up in bullet size or diameter as it relates to aerodynamic or flight characteristics or otherwise stability characteristics. What commonly is found as terminology in the typical reloading manual as being ballistic coefficient is the proper term.
Does that mean that this bullet is just about the optimum, or I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, from the standpoint that as you increase in size, that is to say diameter, above 0.375 caliber, you will find that your factory available bullet selection all of a sudden takes on an entirely different shape, typically, literally shape or configuration. They begin to move toward the blunt nose, round nose, abrupt ogive type configuration, and very typically almost universally flat base, stern on the bullet, that does not lend itself to long-range velocity, stability, energy retention that a much higher ballistic coefficient bullet, as in the typical what we call Spitzer or Spire Point, or otherwise layman's terms, just pointed, long nose, tapered ogive type bullet does. And so you lose the advantage as you move up in diameter, and again referring to what's available in factory produced projectiles for reloading. You lose the advantage of the high coefficient design, which, like I say, the point of no return is definitely 375. Now, in addition to that, 375 also offers the mass as it relates in physical properties to weight, that is up in the 300 grain area or category, needed to retain energy way on out there. We're talking extended ranges again that will average, say, in the area of 1,000 yards, but even exceed that. The more mass you have, the more to characteristic desirable flight objectives are obtained. One is the retention of energy as it pertains to the retainment of velocity. Secondly, stability against wind, or what we call wind bucking characteristics.
Right.
As you move down in mass or weight, the more susceptible a round is to deflection from crosswind, the less tendency that round has to retain whatever initial energy or therefore velocity was imparted to it as it left the muzzle of the barrel, whatever velocity it had accelerated to by the time it exited, in other words, the muzzle. And so these are the factors that it is generally considered anywhere around 300 grain mass is sufficient to counter, or in other words, conversely provide advantage in.
Mm-hmm. So now, I know from talking to you earlier that this was originally brought about by a group of people who wanted to go and hunt in dense brush and have a round that would penetrate the dense brush and still be able to kill the game. And you made those rifles, and then you began to think about something beyond that, because they were talking short-range, dense brush, large game. And how did you decide upon and not only how, but what did you decide upon would be the proper receptacle or chamber to put this bullet in, from which to fire it, and what kind of a barrel and what kind of an action could withstand the tremendous forces that are going to be placed upon it without causing malfunctions or breaking. And we know that we need something that's going to be extremely reliable in future months and years. I want you to think about that, because I've got to take a break. Well, go ahead. Let's start that, because I don't want to take it too early. Go ahead.
Well, again, the chambering, by the way, this was all, as many so-called discoveries many times are, a result from as much accident as anything. It was requested that I construct or custom build several rifles for folks that are engaged in the professional guide business way up north of us. And they requested that I build a configuration bolt-action rifle specifically around that they asked for, which was the improved Magnum 375 that we're discussing here this evening, ballistically. And I kind of half thought that I could see some of their reasoning behind their specifications and design requests, but on the other hand, I certainly didn't look forward to having to do a lot of shooting with a little 8-pound rifle, as it turned out, chambered for that type of round, because very predictably it turned out to be extremely brutal recoil-wise, and my estimations ahead of time proved to be very correct on that as a result from live fire test.
So it helped to be a big man with a lot of beef on your shoulders to handle that.
Exactly. It also was something that even for a 250-pounder would be highly unpleasant to sit for an afternoon and fire from a bench rest. Even at that, it was almost strictly an offhand, small configured, short, stubby, fast-handling little rifle, chambered for this round, which later became key to an entirely different type of project, which was geared not for close-range brush busting, as is commonly referred to in hunting circles, but more the long-range, extreme-range type work, normally associated with either big varmint hunting or in the military sniping. And as it worked out, it only took a little bit of research and a fast review for me of, available factory projectiles in that diameter compared to anything larger, but still below 50 caliber, throughout the available 40 caliber category to know that this thing potentially possessed all of those ballistically desirable factors that we would want to try to get something to go accurately for 1,000 yards or so.
Okay, hold your thoughts there. We're going to be right back, folks. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this short pause. I hope you're all listening tonight and learning the information that you're getting here. You're not likely to run across anywhere else unless you are a professional in this trade, in this industry that John is a part of. The clock that you hear ticking off in your head right now is really there, and it's really ticking, and we're running out of time. Now, when you developed this weapon for these hunters, which is what they were, professional hunting guides, really, and you saw what it could do, and you got involved in that project, and then you began to think about something long range, way out, because evidently the ballistics and the capabilities of this round, because you really hadn't envisioned a rifle yet, gave you the feeling that this could be accomplished, and then you began to go from there. What was it that you, well, you've already told us a little bit about that, but what did you find was probably the best action to be able to chamber this round in a bolt-action rifle?
Well, Bill, I've always had a high degree of respect for the old, what we call large ring Mauser action, also known as the 98 Mauser or 9809. Anyhow, there's various both commercial and military designations for that old action, all of which share one important characteristic as it pertains to reliability, and that is the world famous Pioneer bulletproof, in my terminology, extraction system inherent in the Mauser system. We've had over the years, both in and out of arsenal manufacture, many other variations or spin-offs on the Mauser system action. Two of which come to mind immediately are the U.S. or American, very famous Springfield 03A3, the U.S. 1917 Enfield, not to be confused with the British Lee Enfield from the UK, but the American product. Both of which, by the way, on those other variations, the 03A3 Springfield as well as the 17 Enfield, originally chambered in the military 1906 round, or more commonly referred to as the 30-06. Old venerable both military as well as sporting cartridge. Now, the reason that an extraction system, second to none, was such an important consideration in the original research and development of this long-range rifle system and Wildcat cartridge combination, was the fact that more often than not, when you become engaged in reconfiguring, or slang terminology, wildcatting, changing cartridges in their shape, dimension, configuration, and so forth, characteristically, you're also involved in a situation where you're inherently shortening the life of that brass casing, because you're contorting and bending, if you will, and further extruding and stretching that metal to a point where you are crystallizing and literally work hardening that metal, and therefore rendering it far more susceptible to rupture, fracture, etc.
So the number of times it can be reloaded is limited.
That's right, normally. Amazing thing in this case is that, getting back briefly to the formation of the cartridge in the Wildcat form, from the going back to the original Holland and Holland configuration, It is, first off, one of the simplest to wildcat in the procedure. Wildcat cartridges known to man. It's simply, essentially a one extra, I should say, step operation. And that is, back to that term, fire forming. You literally do, in fact, it's recommended both economy and time-wise that you do simply start out with a factory-loaded Holland & Holland round. Shuck that round into the chamber and touch it off. And in so doing, you have literally at 50 to 52,000 copper units of pressure reformed that casing in one simple, easy step. When you cycle that action and eject that case, you see a transformed casing.
I've looked at a regular 375 H&H Magnum round and a 375 H&H improved Magnum round, and it's got quite a bit of new room in there. How much on a percentage basis do you think it can be filled with more projectile or more powder, as we call it,
or propellant?
Propellant. That's the word I'm looking for.
Right. The net gain in volumetric capacity is 25%.
Now that's quite a bit.
And that's accomplished through number one, eliminating, I should say, the extreme taper characteristic of the original Holland & Holland casing, extending the shoulder, therefore shortening the so-called neck configuration of the original casing, extending that shoulder out or forward 68 thousandths of an inch, and altering the shape of the shoulder to an angle of 40 degrees, which is much sharper than the original very shallow 60-degree shoulder found on your Holland & Holland casing. Now, again, in so doing, we've just accomplished all of those changes in configuration with one simple additional operation, normally over and above, or what is normally found in a typical loading operation, and that is, we've just circumvented all those extra 4 to 7 case forming dies, very commonly found in a typical wildcatter's loading bench complement of tooling. Eliminated all of that. We're right back after that initial fire forming down at the local shooting range, or out behind your house for those folks that live in rural areas. We return to the loading bench utilizing a typical two-die set of dies. So
we haven't weakened the shell that would normally take place. The weakening of the shell that would normally take place in the old method of improving the round has not taken place.
Well, frankly, Bill, I anticipated that some weakening or crystallization would occur metallurgically myself. That's one of the reasons that I knew that I had to be working ultimately with a Mauser system action in case there were ruptures, you understand, in 2 or 3 reloadings. We would be dealing with an action capable, certainly, of extracting even a broken or ruptured casing. However, I can give you actual records whereby the typical case life of this fire-formed Wildcat exceeds the typical factory case life of the 30-06 casing. We're talking on record logbooks indicating 10 to 12 reloadings. So therefore, ultimately what I'm trying to say is that no appreciable loss of case life or shortening of case life did occur. Very amazing to me.
So almost everything that you began with expecting to happen, you found really just the opposite, that just about everything that you've done in the manufacture of this weapon has surprised everybody, hasn't it?
Far more than, let's say it by far exceeded expectations. That's correct. Yeah.
And that's an understatement, I can assure you. So, in your expectations that there could be rupturing, and be specifically because of the amount of propellant that is now in this round compared to what there was designed to be in this round, you chose a Mauser, a large ring locking Mauser action, and you found that this indeed is the best for this round. And
incidentally, Bill, not just the best for this round or this type of project, but I've got to make the generalization statement that it's probably the superior action for someone to select in any chambering, that is to say, any caliber, in an intended application situation where reliability is the keynote, or reliability is the prime consideration.
Well, lack of reliability transfers into liability, so you were right the first time.
Freudian slip. But anyway, yeah, I think it's hard to go wrong. In fact, virtually impossible to go wrong with a Mauser system action for that reason, as well as one other. And that is the initial method of formation or construction or manufacture of the action to begin with. Now, there are a couple of loose copies of the original Mauser system action available on today's current production commercial market, one of which is available from Ruger. Now, I'm not here to detract from or otherwise badmouth Ruger, but I must say that it typifies the very comparison that I had in mind making here for the benefit of those out there that are interested in not necessarily going into the extreme range category of rifles, custom builds and etc., but let's say just making the effort to achieve the highest degree of potential that they may be able to realize out of their current more standard chambered, standard caliber rifle that they may now own. Mm-hmm. And that is that Ruger, as well as several other available centerfire turn bolt actions on the market, they utilize in their means of manufacture a procedure known as investment casting. Now, an investment casting is very simply metallurgically what we call a constantly changing or destabilized piece of steel, meaning that it is very highly susceptible to distortion, expansion, contraction from various outside influences. Temperature is one, stresses are another.
And when these happen, especially in extreme situations, then it's subject to breakage.
Not just breakage, but the distortion is extremely detrimental in situations where you're trying to achieve the utmost in precision. What I'm trying to say here is that you have two methods of manufacture basically in the formation of a typical receiver. One is the very modern, very current method of investment casting already mentioned in connection with Ruger and others. Mm-hmm. The other method, much more traditional in the arms trade, arms manufacture trade, has been what is known as forging or a forged machining, whereby a solid billet of high carbon ordnance tool steel is literally hammer forged into a rough form, and then final precision machine operations are performed to bring it to its final precision configuration. Now, that formation is what you call a very stable, or what we call settled piece of steel, molecularly speaking, very low susceptibility to distortions from temperature changes, stresses, and etc. Lending itself to a much greater degree to the kind of ultimate accuracy that naturally you're after when you're trying to build a precision long-range system.
So the way that this is manufactured not only has to do with whether or not it's going to be reliable and break, but it also has a great deal to do with the accuracy of the final weapon.
That's correct, Bill. I've got to say that that is the primary consideration, is the tendency toward distortion, or conversely, in the case of the forged machining, the lack of tendency toward distortion. That's correct.
Great. Now, so we now know the primary reason why you chose this particular action. How do the people out there find this? Where are some places where they can find the type of action that we're talking about for this weapon that they want to build?
It almost comes down to a situation of scrutinizing your every 2 weeks issue of Shotgun News, haunting gun shows in your area if they still continue, as deteriorating as our political atmosphere is with regard to firearms trade and availability. More or less scrounging almost every little old gun shop or retailer that you can find in your area for even what would appear to be beat up, kind of raggedy old Springfield, if necessary, or certainly Mauser, DWM, or Erfurt, or any of those common original issue. German, Brazilian is fine. Mauser actions that possess the properties and characteristics that we've discussed beforehand here.
Is there anyone who manufactures these kinds of actions today?
The closest to it, in fact, one of the finest choices for this type of project, as well as some smaller caliber projects along this line, or with the objectives we've already discussed in mind, has been, up to about now, the Interarms Whitworth or Mark 10. A series of barreled actions, as well as complete, already stocked rifles. But unfortunately, world events, such as they are, overtaking Yugoslavia, or the former Yugoslavia, I should say, and the breakup therein, has virtually curtailed production. And by the way, this is where Interarms secured their product for import into the U.S., known as the Whitworth or the Mark 10 rifle. And we're to a point now where there is virtually no availability, finally. In fact, I had anticipated that a year or two ago we'd be out of supply, very simply, and domestically. But it's taken this long for us to finally deplete those stocks that were already imported and at the distributor level.
Now, when I purchased mine, I know there were 5 left, and I know that as of yesterday, there are now 2 left.
Right.
And so people are going to have to go and find these other Mauser actions, and if they can find one, they can build this rifle.
That's correct, Bill. That's why I made a point of enumerating the derivative systems from the original Mauser, being, again, specifically the old Springfield 03A3 available surplus, still today here and there where you find them, as well as the old 1917 Enfield model. Both originally chambered 30-06. Interesting note that 1917 U.S. Enfield is still today holds the distinction of being the world's hardest that is on the Rockwell scale. Piece of metal ever used in a rifle receiver. That thing runs way up in the low 80s on the Rockwell scale for hardness. Now, that's good from a durability and friction resistance standpoint. Real bad from the average little gunsmith's machine shop standpoint, because the only thing for example, scope mounting purposes, drilling and tapping, other attenuating machine operation standpoint that will even scratch that 1917 Enfield action generally is either tungsten carbide tooling, as in bits and cutters and whatnot, or cobalt. Very hard. So there are other methods that are used to machine and drill and tap and so forth, the old 17 Enfield, for the necessary alterations and customization that has to occur, but it's certainly not convenient for the average custom gunsmith.
Of course not. Okay, that just about wraps it up for this hour, folks, and we want you to make sure that you stay tuned for the next hour, which will be 9 Pacific, 10 Mountain, 11 Central, and midnight Eastern Standard Time, where we will talk about the barrel, where we will talk about how to find a gunsmith that can put these things together. We'll talk about a compensator. We'll talk about bedding this action and floating the barrel in the stock. We'll talk about a bipod so that you'll have stability when you're, setting up your shot. And we'll talk about optics for this weapon. And if there's any time left, we'll take your calls. If not, well, that's the way it goes, folks. So make sure that you're right here later tonight for another episode of the Hour of the Time. Now, right off the bat, I want to give you Sheriff Mack's address again, and if you have not contributed to this attempt to overturn the Brady bill, then I want you to do that right now. Make out a check and send it to him. This is for all of our freedoms, not just mine, and certainly not just Sheriff Mack's. And if you don't participate, just like if you don't participate in our organic stock buying attempt to take over, and we are going to take over that company, and we're going to get the truth out to the American people in the news media that's been taken away from us. If you don't participate, folks, in my estimation, you'll never be part of the solution. You're part of the problem. And if you're part of the problem, you're getting set for some real hard times, because nobody's going to like you. Richard Mack, Sheriff Richard Mack, Graham County Sheriff, 523 10th Avenue. 523 10th Avenue, Safford, Safford, Arizona, 85546. That's Sheriff Richard Mack, Graham County Sheriff, 523 10th Avenue, Safford, Arizona, 85546. Good night, folks, and God bless you all. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. If you missed the first hour tonight, folks, you missed one of the most important episodes that we have ever put out to you, as far as information on that can be useful to you at some point in the future, probably. And I want to tell you that we're not going to repeat that hour. In this hour, we're not going to do any kind of a recap. We covered the ammunition of the 375 H&H Magnum. We covered how to convert that 375 H&H Magnum round to an improved 375 H&H Magnum. We talked about the action. We talked about all kinds of things. In other words, we're building the ultimate sniper rifle that could be used by militiamen or patriots in this country in case this country were ever invaded and occupied by a foreign power, or maybe even a friendly power, so-called, that wanted to oppress the American people. So we're going to continue in this hour with that, but first, got to read you a little news bulletin here, hot off the Associated Press. Portland, Oregon. former presidential candidate James Bogreitz, Bobo Grits to everybody around here, is establishing a center for white supremacists in central Idaho. A human rights group said Friday, Greitz and some ultra-conservative Christian leaders have purchased about 280 acres of land near Kamaya, Idaho, according to a report issued by the Coalition of Human Dignity. Boy, you folks have bit into the sour apple. You've fallen for the scam, and believe me, hate to say it, but you're going to pay for it. Greitz is a Trojan horse. I've made that statement many times. I've proved on this program that he is a liar, and many other things. In his own words, ladies and gentlemen, not just because I say so, but in his own words. We had a guest on this program who told you about Greitz's real role in drugs coming into this country, and the scam trial on phony passport charges in Nevada, where he was tried in the wrong venue, and the prosecutors knew it. And Greitz went around the country saying he was acquitted by the jury because he was charged with the wrong charges, and that's not true. The case was dismissed because it was the wrong venue. Every time we investigate this guy, turns out that he's lied again and again and again and again and again. And his religion changes according to the religion of whatever audience he's talking to. So all you people up there in Idaho, you better wake your stupid butts up, or you're going to find yourself behind barbed wire, and Greitz is going to be outside holding the keys, laughing. Don't like it? That's tough. And things are going to get a lot tougher. Too many sheeple in this country. Too much apathy, too much ignorancy. Ignorancy? Did I just invent a word? Too much ignorance? And way too much stupidity. You want to take this country back? You want to maintain your freedom? Well, I say unless you wise up and get smart, you're just going to go from one form of slavery to another. Good evening, folks. I hope you're ready for probably, well, it's got to be the second best program, or the second most important, or one of the second most important programs we've ever done. The first half was earlier this evening, and we're building the ultimate sniper rifle. Legally and lawfully, and we talked about why you can't build exactly what John, our guest, has built, which is probably the best long-range sniper rifle that's ever been built in the history of the world, in my estimation, and the estimation of many other people also. John, of course, is not his real name, nor will we give you his real name, but he has been teaching the listeners of this broadcast how to use what's available to build their own ultimate long-range sniper rifle. And we've covered about half of the weapons so far. We've covered the ammunition. We've covered the action. We've talked about why we chose that action. We talked about how this whole project got started, and now we're going to continue, and we're going to go from the action to the barrel. But I think you wanted to make one comment about probably the worst action to get, or the one that the extractor is most prone to failure. Let's put it that way.
Yes, Bill, I did. I'd like to interject this before we get sidetracked and I lose the point entirely. I might mention that every privately owned typical deer rifle, in other words, bolt action sporter out there in private possession now, probably possesses the potential of at least a 100% increase in its accuracy and overall performance capability in the existing chambering or cartridge for which it's chambered now, as is, with a few key point type modifications or improvements. As we discussed in the first hour, one of the prime considerations in the selection of a bolt action specifically for field use, as we've discussed so far, is the properties possessed in the form of its extraction system. And this is what sets the Mauser system far and away above most other available conventional bolt actions. Now, by the same token, one of the least desirable actions for that very reason available on the market, in other words, one of the least useful for our purposes, would be anything in the Remington system, most prevalently the Model 700 Remington, simply because the weak link in the chain in the design system is its extractor. It's the most prone to failure, the most prone to breakage, etc. This equipment has to be capable of sustained use under adverse field conditions, and if it is not capable of that, so happens, the shame of it is, the Remington action is one of the potentially most accurate actions ever designed thus far in the history of small arms. By the same token, the detracting factor involved here is simply an extractor prone to failure. So, having made that point, we'll move right along into the barrel part of the system known as the 375 Improved Magnum long-range rifle. There are two primary manufacturers of barrels out there today, widely recognized for their quality as well as durability, but mainly their high precision accuracy, one of which is Douglas, which produces an international match grade air gauge, perfectly satisfactory for this type of application. My own personal preference runs along the lines of the Schillen brand barrel out of Texas in the international match grade. I might add chromoly alloy, which is your carbon steel, tool steel variant, as opposed to stainless. I've never been a stainless steel fan, particularly in high velocity center fire rifle applications. Stainless steel is comparatively soft and gummy, has a tendency to gall, wear, erode out of tolerance much quicker than high carbon tool steel. So we'll make that point also up front. Now, I might top all of the development thus far in the long-range big bore sniper system centered around the Wildcat 375 Improved Magnum cartridge by saying that any existing, or most any existing available sporter rifle, commonly referred to as safari grade sporter rifle, currently chambered for the 375 H&H Magnum round, has the capability of relatively easily, in competent hands and in a competently equipped machine shop, gunsmithing shop, has the ready ability to be converted to the improved Magnum round easily. Actually, chambering reamer, again in the proper machine tooling setup and in proper hands, the reaming operation and head spacing is not an unusual operation. Not at all an unusual operation, and there's really no further attenuating modifications necessary to accommodate the improved round. And we had a question come in, and I'll just kind of field these in the course of the subject matter being covered right now. Someone phoned in during or between the hours after the previous 6 to 7 hour our time with the question, is this the Ackley improved round? And yes, it is. Actually, the 375 Improved Mag round is, in fact, the original P.O. Ackley designed cartridge. Another question ran along the lines of how does the 375 improved Magnum compare to the 378 Weatherby Mag cartridge? Frankly, ballistically, it is a little bit lighter to the tune of per equal bullet weight, roughly 150 feet per second. Lower muzzle velocity than the 378 Weatherby Magnum cartridge in a standard 24-inch typical Magnum barrel. However, when chambered in the barrel length normally used for the long-range rifle project, which is 28 inches, the performance of the two rounds, both the Wildcat as well as the 378 Weatherby Magnum, are virtually identical or close enough for, shall we say, government work. In other words, within 50 feet a second. And the reason for that is the additional 4 inches of barrel length in the long-range rifle project makes up the difference and boosts that amount of additional velocity. Now, I might also add that the reason in the original research project that the 378 Weatherby was not selected to build the rifle around was simply the fact that the 378 components, that is to say cases, are virtually like hen's teeth. As a matter of fact, as far as availability, also with regard to cost, from the standpoint that there is only one manufacturer or extruder of 378 Weatherby Magnum brass or cartridge casings, and that is Norma. And Norma actually produces the 378 casing in their artillery division, not in their small arms ammunition division. And so therefore, you're extremely limited with regard to availability on that primary component. Without it, you're dead in the water. Also, I might add, for those not at all familiar, the fact that the 378 Weatherby it shares no head dimensions, specifically as it relates to the overall case dimensions, with any other belted Magnum casing on the market. Whereas you see the 375 improved has a commonality with all other belted Magnum cases, from 22 caliber Magnums clear on up to 458 Winchester.
And we've already established that the 375 H&H Magnum round is readily available and is not in short supply. And you're going to manufacture the improved case yourself when you fire this 375 H&H Magnum in the modified chamber of your new barrel, your new action, and it's going to come out as the new casing, which you're going to then reload, and that's how you obtain the 375 H&H Magnum improved. So the barrel we've established, as far as your preference goes, is the high carbon steel chrome alloyed 28-inch barrel, and of course with the modified chamber, which can be done by any competent machine shop or gunsmith.
Correct. Yeah, Bill, that's absolutely correct. So that covers a couple of very, very valid and astute questions that were phoned in, during the couple-hour break there between shows. And another question was, did we pick the Mauser action only for the extraction or extractor reliability? Apparently they weren't listening or didn't copy the entire previous transmission, from the standpoint that no, the other factor was the fact that the typical Mauser is a forging or forged machining in addition to the attributes of this extraction system. The question, will any Model 98 Mauser work, such as a World War II? Here again, someone I don't think quite listening, although the question would normally otherwise be valid. Yes, there's almost, with the exception of perhaps two Arsenal origin manufacturers, almost any vintage surplus large ring Mauser action will work for this purpose. And then a question regarding the Seiko Model TRG-S action. Apparently this caller was advised that it was better than a Mauser, and then I can't read the rest of it quite, but anyway, no, again, the weak point there is a serious compromise in the extraction system. I can't put it any more simply than that. What we're doing is we're hitting the high points with reference to durability, reliability, and then, of course, accuracy potential. And we find that all of those attributes are found in the age-old Mauser system, dating back into the 19th century. Now, what I'd like to do from this point is proceed on into what can be done to maximize the performance of all those privately held turn bolts out there in gun racks and closets and pickup cab racks and whatnot currently, to make those commonly chambered weapons perform to maximum ranges with maximum hit predictability or probability. And first, right off the bat, and this is without regard to manufacturer or origin of, I don't care if it's a Ruger Model 77 or the Remington 700, as I mentioned, fine accuracy potential in that action right off the bat, or your Winchester Model 670 or what have you. Without exception, there's not a single one of those out of the box, off the rack, brand new production rifles whereby their capability cannot be increased by 100% right up front with one very simple operation if it's done properly.
And it just happens to be the next operation that would be performed after the mating of the action and the barrel on the long-range rifle that we're building.
Coincidentally, that's the case. And that operation is known very simply, and it is an accurizing operation, as glass bedding or micro bedding and barrel floating. Now, when I make the qualification done properly, what I need to stress or emphasize here is that if you're requesting this operation be done by a local smith in your area, you must normally specify to him that and describe verbally or even with a drawing if necessary, or by demonstration, that you intend for him to fiberglass bed the entire action channel from the very rearmost tip of the tang forward to mid-chamber. The entire, thoroughly bed the entire action channel. Most often, the average tradesman or smith will, very much like factories today, consider a bedding job to be a glob of glass daubed into the recoil lug recess, inletted in your typical wood or synthetic stock, and consider that a bedding job. And it is not. What you're endeavoring to achieve here is precise micro support of that entire receiver from the very rear of the tang, that is behind the trigger plate and trigger group, clear forward to midway chamber. Then, where the glass ends at mid-chamber, forward of that, throughout the barrel channel, forward through the forend, or what's known as the forewood, that area must be channeled out, or slang terms, what we call hogged out, to accommodate an absolute air clearance, allowing, in the case of wood stocks, by the way, for expansion, contraction, and distortion due to humidity and atmosphere and wet weather. whereby the wood would be expected to swell and distort. You have to channel out to such an extent that you maintain an absolutely air gauge, or that is to say, absence of wood to metal contact from that glass bedding forward.
Actually, from the glass bedding forward, mid-chamber forward, you don't ever want anything to touch the barrel.
That's right.
Including a bipod.
Correct.
And we'll get into that later, but I just want to make that point.
Now, having done that, what I meant by 100% improvement in accuracy potential literally means this. You take the typical, let's say, M77 Ruger, for sake of example, with a capability, let's say, in the 30-06 chambering of typically holding a 1 1/8 inch group at 100 yards, should just be a hair over what we call minute of angle accuracy. And by the way, we're speaking in terms of 5-round successive groups. And it will literally, that one action or one operation having been completed alone, reduce that group size or group diameter by 50%. So that means that you'll instantly be in the 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch maximum center to center group dimension.
And that's quite an improvement with just one operation.
Simple to perform operation, and usually relatively inexpensive. I'd have to take a market average. Don't hold me to this, but a good guideline or rule of thumb nationally is probably going to be under $75, for that one. And again, having completed that, I can't stress it enough, that single operation is at the top of the priority list as it regards dramatic impact on your resulting performance. Now, operation number 2, believe it or not, has absolutely nothing to do with physical modifications to the weapon itself. We want to focus at this point on the capability to hand load. In other words, of the owner-shooter's capability to roll his own ammunition. Having that capability, and incidentally most folks today relate to that capability as it regards expense or economy in shooting, or stockpiling, or whatever it is they might have in mind. Frankly, that attribute of reloading is quite a ways down the priority list. The emphasis here should be placed on the fact that once appraised of the procedure, the shooter has the capability of scientifically developing a load matched to that specific rifle. For this, I should use as an example the fact that there are no two, for example, Remington 700 rifles, same chambering, that are identically the same. They're a machine tool product, and a machine tool product is like fingerprint. That's why various law enforcement agencies have traditionally, in the modern age, certainly throughout the 20th century, utilized rifling striations as an identifying ballistic factor for recovered bullets from torsos and etc., cadavers. For the same reason, you will find that, again, being a machine tool product, that no two rifles, although the same model, virtually identical in appearance, and being of the same caliber or chambering, are going to perform exactly the same with the same load. So, therefore, the hand loader has the option and the capability of developing a load for his individual rifle that will perform to an optimum. Goal usually previously set. If by golly, if all things are equal, all conditions are tip-top mechanically in that rifle, otherwise, no reason to expect that if he sets a goal as a half minute of angle group, that it won't be achieved if he simply applies enough patience at the loading bench. And point number 3, with regard to the home processed, or shall we say recycled sporting rifle, crowning, that is, close attention being paid to the way the rifle's muzzle is finished off, is critical. Not quite as romantic from the standpoint that it will never produce the dramatic results that bedding and floating nor that hand loading will produce as far as consistency or repeatability improvements in a rifle, but certainly generally beneficial. Target recrowning of the typical muzzle will produce very positive results, usually in the neighborhood of 20 to 25% group diameter reduction. And I might add that if done to specification, and that is a what we call square cut target recess crown, you have a resulting crown that will protect the very highly critical, from an accuracy standpoint, chamfer on the barrel's bore, meaning that impacts, by rocks and whatnot to the barrel's muzzle will generally avoid any critical accuracy destroying damage to that highly critical chamfer at the muzzle. And fourthly, in operation that is more of a custom personal type item would be a trigger job, that is competent trigger work on the trigger group to establish a release, or what's known as let off, striker let off, established at a weight that is manageable for the individual and preferable for the conditions in which the rifle is to be applied. Now, I'll have to say this, the average sporter found on a deer trip in the field, really not desirable to have anything much below a 2 3/4 pound or 44 ounce typical trigger release on that rifle from several standpoints. You get much below that, down around 2 pounds, you're developing a risky trigger pull, one in which safety is not a factor that can be totally controlled.
Don't go away, folks. We've got to take a short break. Be right back after this pause. For those of you who may have missed the first hour earlier this evening, you may order tapes of the hour of the time. Specify the date and the subject. You must specify both the date and the subject, and you must state early or late or both. Now make sure that you do that, because if you don't, we're going to send you the tape that we think you want, and it may not be the one that you actually want. If you're not a CADG member, tapes are $8 per hour. If you are a CADG member, then you know that tapes are $6. Prices are post-paid, which means you don't have to send anything extra for postage or handling. Send to William Cooper, P.O. Box 1420, Sholo, Arizona, 85901. That's P.O. Box 1420, Sholo, Arizona, 85901. Well, John, let's continue. We got a lot to talk about and just a little bit of time to do it in.
I'll expand a little bit further, Bill, on the trigger job project or specification, as it should be stated to the practitioner or tradesman in your local area. I would recommend asking the competent individual to establish a let-off or release right at 44 ounces, 2 3/4 pounds. We found that overall, for general long-range target work, about the most manageable, predictable trigger available and consistent. Round-to-round consistency here is just as important as that 1/10 grain or less tolerance or allowable deviance in your powder charge. Just as important. At the same time, specify the elimination or total absence of any pre-travel slack in the trigger and to minimize any over travel, which is of course that amount of trigger arc remaining after the release, which is also a distraction. Having done that, and combining all four of these operations, even though one is not directly, and that's being the hand loading operation, not being directly related to modifications to a weapon per se, adding all of these together, which I've just done during the break, I'd say that on average across the country, this package, we'll call it, combined cost-wise, would amount to probably $450. However, the results produced by this package would exceed, using other approaches, what you could very easily spend in excess of $1,000 to achieve.
Well, let's give them an example with building the long-range rifle that we're talking about building. I already have approximately $800 into it, and I have just ordered only the Interarms Mark 10 375 H&H Magnum Whitworth rifle and the scope. And we'll talk about scopes a little bit later if we have time. Well, we've got to make time. But by the time all the modifications are done that I need done to this rifle to give me the ultimate sniper rifle that I want, and bear in mind, folks, this is not an assault rifle. This is a sniper rifle. It's a specialized rifle for one thing only: hitting a target at an extremely long range and doing it accurately, consistently. So I estimate that I'll probably have $1,400 or $1,500 into this rifle when I'm finished, and could possibly be more.
That would be a very close assessment. Let's give it a range of $1,450 to $1,600.
Okay.
Reality-wise.
Now compare that to what you're talking $450, $475 to make improvements on what they already have, rather than starting from scratch and building a new rifle. That's quite a difference in money output.
Yes, it is. And actually, other than the sheer ballistic considerations and attenuating capabilities to the much heavier 375 cartridge, anything typically within the 30 caliber, both standard, and I'm going to take in 7.62 NATO now, 308 commercially, 30-06, any one of the four typical standard 300 Magnum family inclusive, amongst any of those choices that I think we're going to find tons of out there already an issue amongst the populace, all of which, having made these previous modifications that I just described and enumerated, would give you the capability very easily of operational range between 5 and 750 yards, with I think very little disappointment.
And that's right in the ballpark for our demand, which is we've got to be able to hit the enemy 500 yards and out. The farther out, the better. All modern armies are trained to be effective and fight within 200 yards of whoever they're fighting. And if you can keep them at that distance, or if you can hit your target at that distance, they're literally going to be at a great disadvantage, and we need every advantage that we can get. So that's good. You're telling them that with what they have, performing these basic modifications or adjustments, as the case may be, that they're going to be able to get out to that distance.
That's correct, Bill.
Now, with the rifle that we're building, what are we talking about?
Let's qualify that. You mean in terms of cost?
No, I mean in terms of let's talk about cost, and then let's talk about range.
Well, let's say, which is not the case, so we're being academic here largely, but let's say that all components necessary to assemble or construct the long-range system that we started the first hour going into some detail in description of were all available, which they're not. So that right there is a major insurpassable obstruction at the moment. If all those things were present, the components were available, you'd be talking cost-wise in the neighborhood typically of $3,800 to complete that project. Now, that would include everything, the custom dies, a start on some of the ammunition components, all set up and shipped in a hard case, and that's nice. But unfortunately, that discussion is largely academic because of diminishing and unavailable supply. But by comparison, there you would have a weapon that, very practically, expectations of 1 mile or 1,760 yards is not too much to expect out of the system.
Not only not too much, but has been done. The rifle's been built. It has been done. It has been proven. And the reason we're doing this program tonight is because you can't order that rifle now because, as John has stated, you cannot get the parts that you need to he can't build it. Nobody can build it now because the parts aren't there. But you can build your own following the instructions we gave during the first hour of the time and the instructions that we're giving you during this hour of the time. And you can also, if you choose not to go that route, it would also be